So I'm just going to talk about a paradigm that I've come across, discovered, I would say, that I call cosmic psychology or cosmic motivational psychology. And this is from my study of two things, mostly what I call or what is the three principles that, according to ancient scriptures in Sanskrit, created the world. So these are sattva, which means light, and rajasic, which means action or motion. And the third is tamasic, which means darkness, inertia, dullness, and many other things. And here I see a parallel with the basic principles of physics. And so it fits everything. If you see it that way, take a look. The three basic principles that physics recognizes that the world is made of are light, kinetics, and kinetics means any kind of motion or movement or activity. And the third is inertia or mass. So you see how these are a perfect parallel, absolutely perfect parallel. And to look at it, of course, you have to look at the properties and the characteristics of each of these, but they fit. Now, if you are from any tradition, any culture, any type of paradigm of your own, they will fit into this basic paradigm, as I'm calling it. Let me talk a minute about consciousness, because the consciousness is what makes everything work. At least in the ancient scriptures, the Sanskrit scriptures, is very clear. It's not one and the same as matter, but it is what makes matter alive. So in that regard, looking at the paradigm I just mentioned, you take the word light. To everyone, light represents a goodness, a pleasantness, an intelligence, something that makes things work with harmony and synchronicity and all the things that we want and harmony in our life. Now, a light is also, as some people have already have talked about, is a leading thing when people are going to transition or die, right? It is always considered an efficacious to have light. So the paradigm here, a model, is that if you look at everything, you try to have intention that is sattvic or full of light. It amounts to your intention. It comes to you, it becomes very significant to you. And so you progress in that way. You can have any kind of transformation, transcendence, positivities. And this in itself is what leads to consciousness. I mean, consciousness in a more total way. There is no other way that, should I say, arm of this paradigm that leads to consciousness. Certainly, activity alone, it does not lead. This takes a lot of explanation, but this is a short talk, so I can only mention a few things. In the tamasic or the dullness, it does not lead to light. But the way the operation works is that it's a peeling away and getting rid of the darkness, getting rid of the ignorance, getting rid of what is not known. It's not so much in what is not known, but what is in one's heart. in the sense of goodness and intention, and you can say spirituality that is uplifting. I mean, the ends, the words have to be your own. So you make your own list. But when it comes to the purity of the mind, purity of the heart, then the consciousness is opening up. It's not that the consciousness opens up, but the consciousness is attracted to yourself in that way that you become more consciousness, which can be defined as light itself. In other words, when a person dies, what leaves, what occurs in this cosmic sense is that the consciousness leaves your body. Now, there is a way that it leaves. So all this is just to mention, but to be studied more. The way that it leaves is through your breath. That's why breath is so important. It is the breath that activates things in your life and gives life. And there is actually in my studies, I don't remember the reference now, but I myself, found that finally, what is the difference in prana and breath? And as I came upon, when you combine your breath with with your not consciousness, but your breath and what should I say, inside you, it becomes prana. Okay, when your breath is outside, it's outside, but when it's within you and you're done, usually you do breathing practices, you unite this with your own tissues of the body, you're able to experience more consciousness through the prana. Maybe that could be explained better. So I want to take this a few steps further, of course, and I would love to have your questions. If you have any, please put them in the chat. How does this work more within the system? Well, it works through your mind. It works through intention, like I mentioned. It is more to do with your removing, and this has been said in other ways, but to see that the ignorance is always in the darkness or in the tamasic or in the inertia principle. It's a peeling away of that brings the higher consciousness, the deeper consciousness, the more pure light consciousness of light. Now, when you're working, I mean, as the mind works, there are also some principles that are helpful to understand. So how do we receive information to our inner self? Well, our senses are what bring the information of all kinds, whether it is smell, taste, hearing, or whatever it is, the five senses. Bring this to our mind, to our neuropsychology. And then the second principle is our intellect, our intelligence that works on it. So it might be simply to identify something. It may be the intellect works that it analyzes it. It is this, it's connected to that, and how will it work? This discernment is what the intellect does. And then there's one more principle, it's the ego. I think this is such a beautiful way to see the mind, and you should try it on, if you will. Does it work for you? Is it make sense? The third is the ego. The ego either accepts what the intellect has decided, what the intellect has analyzed, or the ego says no. It really owns the mind, so to speak, because no matter what may it be, the ego has to agree or it disagrees. So these three never work separate, but there are processes that work together. But the final thing is what the ego does. So we all know how important the ego is. And the key is how to help it to work in a best way. That's not explaining it so much. And the intellect has to work at its best. So there's a lot of awareness has to be made, a lot of mindfulness, but to see that things are the 3 points I made earlier. If you don't want to use Sanskrit words, that's fine. You can use the physics words. There is light in our universe, there is action and motion, and there is the third thing, there is darkness or inertia. There is a mountain, that's a mass, but we also have mass in us. And that mass has to be chipped away, chipping away the ignorance, chipping away the darkness. And there are millions of ways to do these things. But this, I guess you can say umbrella, but it's not really a very good one. Example, it covers all of it. But the final thing is, if you want more happiness, you have to chip away at that, get rid of that darkness, and you will get light, and you have more harmony, more happiness, more intelligence. And when it comes times to die, you are already feeling closer to the ultimate sattvic, the ultimate light of the universe. It's already in you. I mean, it's in a person anyway, but you've gotten rid of some of the pain, some of the suffering that goes with the inertia, and you're more full of light. This is what a person wants. They want to die in great peace. Who does not want that? So the consciousness principle, though, is something to understand, also to reflect on, to dialogue with. And as I have studied, as I've come to understand, it is not going to ever be understood by science in the way that people would like. It doesn't have any dimensions except that it is illumination itself. It is illumination itself, and it shines on everything. It shines like the sun. It shines on the beautiful tree, and it also shines on the dead tree, right? The reflection, what comes through is the materiality defines how the consciousness is shown. If that makes sense to you, it is not the consciousness that change, but it is the form and what the form consists of. Are there any questions or debate?
We've got
How much time have we taken up?
we've got a little bit of time yet for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly, if there are any questions.
Oh,
there's one in the chat. Can you see it? Let me read it to you because I know you're on your phone.
Yeah, thank you.
And so it says, you call this cosmic motivational psychology. Do you feel a particular mantra has an effect on the interactions or best workings of the process you speak of?
Oh, that's a very good question, because the mantra would be one that belongs to the activity, the kinetics. It's an action that we perform. I mean, saying a mantra is an action that someone performs, just like prayer is. So, but it is transforming. It will reduce the darkness and bring more light. And isn't that the ideal of prayer? Isn't that the ideal of mantra? It's an effort, just like pranayama is. It's an effort of refinement. It is an effort. I mean, many things are, because everything in life can be, it is properties of these three properties of. So it's definitely. I think I covered that. Um, doing science, doing scientific studies. Um, First of all, usually the dominance in a person is discussed for yourself. You decide, well, hey, is my mind more sattvic? Is my mind more um, rajasic, more activity, constantly moving? Um, or is my mind more tamasic? Well, as an example, sleep. Too much, say, oversleeping makes you feel dull. Would you agree? You oversleep, really got more than you needed. Do you feel more alert or more dull? Usually a person feels more dull. I mean, unless they're healing from some illness, they feel more dull. And so this is more tamasic. But they may be so tamasic, they cannot even get their work done because everything is covered like with a veil, a dullness. So the person can say, though, I can get up. I want to be more sattvic. I want to be more rajasic, more active. But mostly, if you say you want to have more light in your life, you will find yourself getting up. You will find yourself wanting to transform from this dull state to a more light and enlightened state. Um, all of our life is an example. All of it is either a refinement or to the other side. So all of this, the dullness, all of the anxieties, all the fear, and all the suffering belong to the dominance that comes with inertia and dullness. And all of that has refinement, light, intelligence, harmony, happiness goes with a dominance of the sattva or the light. And by the way, lots of things this includes, but we are, according to this model, if you can call it a model, uh, made up of these things. In other words, these principles are always in us and they always change and shift, continually change and shift, so that you are more, you've been meditating, you're going through prayer, and you are doing so many things. You will become more sattvic, you will become more light, you will see things differently. Then you become a log and you sleep and sleep and sleep. You will have a different consciousness about your presence, right? Any other questions or comments? Does it make sense to you? I want to ask that question. Yes, are you there, someone?
There was one other question, and you've got a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Are the three gunas present in the process of death and after when we die, or do they just transform?
That's a good one. Yes, definitely. The three gunas are present at the time of death. A person who dies in harmony and peace has a dominance of the sattva. A person who dies in a lot of suffering, they don't want to die, resisting, not understanding, even anger. There are lots of people this happens to. That's definitely a tamasic death. What happens after? Well, that's a good question too. I mean, if you carry, if part of you, the subtle part, remains It's because of these three principles that are still within you. If a person is fortunate enough to die with a sufficient sattva, then they're able to actually cross the barrier, you might say, of the principle of consciousness. It's, in other words, it's completely different than the principle that we live in, which is known as nature. That's why it's not, we're not able as scientists to discover it. And we know that from a lot of scientists. They just give up under trying to understand what the consciousness is. So if, well, this is going into something, I don't know how you feel about it, but this is anyway one way to see the consciousness itself is so pure. It's just illumination itself, but it doesn't have properties. It's like the sun. I mean, it shines, and that's all that it does. It doesn't, that is it. But if a person is able to accomplish that, so to speak, you can't actually accomplish it. That's something that is dominant by the gunas if they are in complete harmony. But I don't want to get into that. That's really needs a lot of more explanation. Then there is nothing left. The separation is made and you will have no future lifetime. But mostly what happens is that those gunas remain working and you have another life based on them.